Well, good morning and thank you all for joining us for another COVID-19 business webinar. Today, we are focusing on surviving in a digital environment. I'm Paul Guerra, the Chief Executive of the Victorian Chamber, and it's great to be with you today. Today's discussions, I've got to say, will be a fascinating insight into how some of Victoria's most well-known and much loved destinations have adapted to operate in a wholly digital environment in the COVID-19 lockdown. I'm delighted to have Carmel O'Keefe, the General Manager Digital Life at Museums Victoria, and Caroline Ralphsmith. I've got to call her Ralph because that's what she's affectionately known as, the Executive General Manager of Customer Engagement at the Victorian Racing Club, to share their insights. To round it out, we've got a long-term friend of mine, Ben Hall, from an agency called Frankly, who'll be able to share insights for our members who want to build a strong digital presence and strategy, but kind of don't know where to start. So Ben will be able to shed some light on that. Of course, we're holding today's webinar in conjunction with Small Business Victoria, and the aim of these webinars is to help you, our members and guests, with information on how you can manage the COVID-19 crisis in your business. Don't forget, you can go to www.business.vic.gov.au to access advice and business grants available from the state government. And of course, for access to the Victorian Chamber's business advice and assistance, and to sign up for our free membership at the moment, you can go to www.victorianchamber.com.au. So with that, let's get into today's webinar. Today's format's a little different. I'm going to invite Carmel, Ben, and then Ralph to give a brief recap on their organisation's journey through the coronavirus crisis so far. And then we're going to move into a panel discussion to share their insights. So let's get going. First up is Carmel O'Keefe, the General Manager Digital Life at Museums Victoria. And I'm looking forward to hearing what Museums Victoria has done since the COVID-19 crisis hit. Welcome, Carmel. Carmel, you're on mute.
Look, that we had to start with that, didn't we? Because that is the new refrain that we've got now. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Wish I had $1 for every time I had to say that, Carmel.
Exactly. We're still doing it. So, look, thank you, Paul, for the opportunity to be involved today. I'm very pleased to say that a number of our venues reopened last weekend, and we are welcoming visitors back on site. And I hope everyone watching will plan to visit to one of our venues when you can. Those coming to Melbourne Museum will notice a fabulous new artwork on the exterior of our building, which says Wominjeka, a word meaning welcome in the Boonwurrung and Woiwurrung language, in recognition of the traditional owners of Melbourne. And I would like to acknowledge that I'm on their country today as I speak to you. So I want to start with a bit of background about the organisation. Museums Victoria is Australia's largest public museums organisation. It operates several venues in Melbourne, including Melbourne Museum, Bunjalaka Cultural Centre, IMAX and the Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton, the Immigration Museum in Flinders Street, and Science Works over in Spotswood. Museums Victoria is the custodian of the state collection of more than 17 million items, and it's a collection that began in 1854. Today, we employ 600 people who are involved in scientific and humanities research, education, exhibition and public programs development, visitor services and digital life, and that's where I come in. So as you mentioned, developing an audience-centred digital life is part of our strategic plan. And the thing that struck me when I joined the organisation a couple of years ago was the amazing expertise and knowledge that exists within our walls. As a former journo, I could see stories in every nook and cranny and person in the building. And these stories were traditionally told via our exhibitions and on-site programs. So not surprisingly, the first initiative under the Digital Life strategy I developed with my colleagues was to create a digital storytelling unit within the organisation to share those stories beyond the walls. That investment in the skills, tools and resources to create and share story-based content to audiences via digital channels meant we were well equipped to adapt to becoming a digital-only venue when our physical doors closed back in March. We knew we had to maintain engagement with our audiences. Our vision is to enrich people with discovery and trusted knowledge. That's our vision and our mantra. And so about 100 days ago, I think it was 100 days yesterday, not that I'm counting, our online multi-channel content and brand strategy called Museum at Home came into being. And Since then, we have definitely achieved our aims, and I've just got some latest figures for you that I wanted to share. We have reached 6.9 million people on our social media and website channels since we began Museum at Home. Our video content has attracted 1.47 million views, and more than 72,000 unique visitors have visited our online education resources. So lockdown has certainly given us the opportunity to accelerate our digital life.
Fabulous. That's a great insight, Carmel. I guess we've all shared the excitement of the night at the museum films, but you've brought it to life in such a different way, and we're going to explore that a bit more later on. There's people that you've come across in your journey that have said they might have done something, and then there's those that you've come across that absolutely have done it. And Ben Hall is one of these people that has absolutely done it from the beginnings of a marketer. He's lived a digital journey through a number of different businesses, and now finds himself as the managing director of Frankly, an agency designed to get the best out of digital. And with that, welcome, Ben. We'd love to hear more around what you're seeing in the digital world and the benefits that come from that.
Let me go to the mute. Am I on?
Yep.
Thanks for having us, Paul, and it's great to be on the panel with both Carmel and Ralph. A really interesting time when you work in the digital world, when everything shuts down. And I suppose a bit of a background on Frankly as a performance business and how that affects us, and how we've assisted businesses over this transition. We were built around performance marketing, so predominantly through the digital platforms. We're a private equity owned group, and we've built businesses such as Dodo, LK Property Group, acquired BPO, and more recently we've acquired the MBL and started to grow that through our digital channels as well. And Frankly was around utilising data on a daily basis to understand the behaviours of your consumers and your supporters to generate the best ROI for your business. What we were finding as a business was that a traditional model would be that people put some advertising to market and they will review a campaign 2 to 3 months down the track and try to analyse the results. We're more focused on a day-to-day basis of understanding that digital has changed so dramatically. Content is so readily available. There are so many channels to advertise on that if you are not tracking your data on a daily basis and you are not testing and measuring your messages, your creative and your call to actions, you're actually wasting a large proportion of your funds. So what we've actually seen off the back of that is a lot of businesses coming to us and wanting to digitise their product. And the biggest challenge we see in that space is people don't understand their data before they begin. So we invest heavily in understanding the consumer behaviour, the audience that you already built up, and then we work with our clients to make sure on a daily basis that we're getting the best performance from their campaign. That can be an onerous campaign to begin with, and it's really, really important to understand this is a long-term play, not a short-term play. And more recently, we actually, through the COVID period, also started to realise that people are not comfortable with their web presence. So I would say our increase in our traffic has actually come from businesses also wanting to build greater websites, more mobile websites, and understand the analytics behind that. So that would be my insights in the last couple of months of the COVID period, and hopefully some of the questions will answer some of the more detailed requirements when launching your platforms.
Brilliant, thanks, Ben. So we've heard Ben's perspective through Carmel. We've heard through Ben in terms of the use of data to actually drive customer engagement. And now we're going to talk to Caroline Ralphsmith, or Ralph, the Executive General Manager of Customer Engagement at the Victorian Racing Club, around how that data insight is used. And Ralph, I've got to say, COVID absolutely turned your industry, not just your racing club, but the industry on its head. You know, racing's such a central part of Victoria's events calendar, particularly around the Melbourne Cup Carnival, which is the time-honoured festival in this great city of ours that occurs out at the VRC. We'd love to hear what you've done through this crisis and sneak peek in terms of what's in for the future for us with the Victorian Racing Club. Welcome, Ralph.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Paul, and for the rest of the team. Good morning, everybody. Yes, it has. I think anybody that is managing a major event business or a sporting business where the whole point of us has often been bringing people together to have fun, And that is exactly the opposite of what everyone wants us to do right now. So definitely poses some challenges. Our first step was really understand the health guidelines and make sure we very quickly put in place, as we all have, I think, work from home rules, making sure that what we're doing is aligned and we really understand the implications of that. But in our case, we happen to have been relatively lucky in that horse racing itself could continue. So while we couldn't have patrons, we actually still had to make sure that all of the track and all of the facilities for the participants of horse racing, the jockeys, the trainers, and actually the beautiful equine athletes, that was all ready to go. So there's a whole lot of costs associated with that and process, and very, very strict lockdown in terms of who could come in and temperature checking and all those sorts of things. We pretty much had to start at about mid-March. So that has been going on and has thankfully, and touch wood as I say it, so far so good. But what of course it's meant is that for our staff, we had to really look at costs and managing how we face into some of that. So we stood down a lot of our people. The executive team were down to 3 days, and we really had to then focus on how do we use what we've got at the moment and be as efficient as possible. And as Ben mentioned, when you start to look at what you really want to do in that space, you need to get into digital. So we did a number of things on the digital world that I think in the past we would have imagined might take us many, many months. Suddenly you can get up a beautiful website that has a whole lot of associated benefits for your sponsors and for your customers in one place. And we call that VRC at home, which is fantastic. We launched our Equine Welfare Bulletin, which was a really nice strategic alignment with what we want to do and how we want to be seen, but also accessed digitally. We developed a lot of content, lots of interviews, and really using our connections to try and give some value back both to our members, to our customers, to our stakeholders and partners, and also to basically our staff too, to make sure that there's work for them to do. And all of that I see as being not just a tactical response. I actually see it as being something that we will now need to make sure we continue on that, grow it, and actually expand all of that off-course engagement opportunity as we move forward with hopefully the race that starts the nation, the Melbourne Cup in November.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ralph. Well, now you've had a chance to meet our panelists, and the years of experience that we have on our panel today is just extraordinary. And we want to move now into a broader discussion on the challenges and opportunities that not only their businesses have faced, but we'll try and give it some insight in terms of what you might be experiencing as well. So let's welcome back both Carmel and Ben to join Ralph. So my first question, Ralph, might come to you. The VRC has been heavily impacted by COVID, and the threat of outbreaks will pose a risk to any event in the future. What were the first actions you made as an organisation when the restrictions were announced?
The very first ones that we made were around really ensuring that we were aligned with all of our industry partners, so our other race clubs, with Racing Victoria, and others that we all felt incredibly privileged that we could still be racing. And the reason that's really important is not just because it is what we do, but also as an athlete, horses do need to be running. So it's a little bit like a very, very elite athlete of any sort. You can't just pop them in a box and hope that, you know, with a few hoofs on the ground, they'll be okay. So there's a huge equine welfare element to actually racing for racehorses. And so that was really important. And of course, there is about 10% of our revenue also comes from wagering. So we really needed to protect that and work very closely across the industry, not just for ourselves, to ensure that we were doing everything right in terms of protecting every participant.
Yeah, wonderful. So Carmel, digital strategy, it's a word that we're hearing, or two words that we're hearing more now, and there's a little bit of understanding about it. I might get you to talk a bit about that, but importantly, the journey that you've taken Museums Victoria on, when did it start, and how did you have to adapt it to the COVID environment, or were you already in play before COVID hit?
Yeah, we were already in play, but I think everybody felt the rapidness of the change. Personally, I was actually in a lovely bubble on Kangaroo Island, spending some money into that economy in March when I got the call from my CEO to say the doors were shutting at Museums Victoria, and we were all working from home. And I literally drove back the next day straight to my home office and didn't return into the building. So that challenge of actually moving everybody out of the building as rapidly as we can was something that we all faced. But fortunately, I come from a group of people that are very creative and just very audience focused, and to pick up on Ben's point, very data focused as well. So we harnessed that energy of the staff, many of whom switched immediately to thinking, how do I make the things that I normally do, such as a public program or an exhibition or an event, digital? I did a call out just throughout through our staff kind of email, and we got close to 200 ideas within a week of things we should be doing. And I have to say, a lot of them fell into groups, and we sort of grouped them together, and we've been able to action about 100 of those ideas in the last 100 days. But we fell into our lanes quite naturally. We are, as I said, we're good at school groups and families and those sorts of things. So those were the sorts of things that came together. And apart from bringing together all the things we currently did online, and we started with a very minimal product. We had 4 pages basically of links of things that existed. We got that up as quickly as we could, and we decided that what we needed was to have a cohesive identity for that, so we could market that through our social channels. So our first step was to provide the digital identity so we could have our multi-channels linked together, and Museum at Home was the hashtag that we use. We were the first in Australia to use it. Everybody, of course, is using it now, and that's fantastic because it means we're in the space where our audiences are. We know that audiences are largely on social media, so we needed to use those channels to bring them to a destination online, a digital destination that had the content that they were looking for. We also had a really strong media campaign, and it was important when we kicked off the Museum at Home initiative that I had a steering group around me that included our media person, our marketing people, our social media person, and our audience insights person. And we met daily. We operated in a very agile way. We met every single day to sort of talk about what is it that we're working on, what can we put up this week, what is our audience telling us. And we used ourselves as our audience. We were going through this ourselves. We were adapting to working from home. We were adapting to using new tools and technologies. We did this at the start of school holidays, so we had lots of parents with kids, and we started to say, well, what do we need? What do we need from this space? And that led us to kind of repurposing things like an amazing mindfulness piece that we had just launched in a new space at the museum called Learning Lab, which was an immersive kind of 270-degree experience that we then converted into a video that we could play online. And that's been really popular. We immediately started surveying teachers to find out what did they need, how could we prepare for the start of the new school term. And that's why we focused pretty much on our learning option and our play option as our first 2 points of difference. So I think for us, it was, we were ready. We were already thinking about digital, but what this environment has led us to be is focusing on digital and all of our channels being a cohesive message to our audience so that it makes it easy for them to discover what we've got.
Yeah, great. And Ben, you come at this from a slightly different perspective because you're heavily data-led. In fact, that's the proposition that you take before you move into anything in and around the digital platform. Can you share some insights why, and then perhaps give us some examples of where that's been used to benefit business?
Sure. I think one of the greatest challenges, I think Ralph and Carmel both talked about that, is everybody wants to get to digital. And I probably come from a performance-based, where I'm looking at driving a database or looking at making a sale or acquiring a conversion through e-com. So a little bit different from an engagement piece that the other two they're talking about. But for us, the biggest challenge I see when I see business coming to myself is they don't understand the baseline of their data. So they don't understand where their traffic's coming from, who are they, where are they spending time on their sites. And the beauty of Google and GA Analytics is that most of that is there if you understand how to use the platform. And it will tell you a lot about who you're talking to. It also tells you a lot about who you're not talking to as well. So it's providing you opportunity to maximize your current intent audiences, but it also tells you a lot about the affinity audiences that you should be targeting. And certain things that need to be set up on your sites before you go and invest in digital marketing. So basic conversion goals. Conversion goals are really, really important for data because it actually tells us and can link all the way back through to our attribution model as to where that data is coming from, and the different filters is where it gets to before it converts. That's incredibly important to understand before you spend any money in the digital marketing space. Setting up event goals. How many pages on your site are people visiting? Where would you like them to go? What does that look like? Time on site. If you don't have those goals set up, you actually don't know where they're spending their time. It's very, very difficult to market when you don't understand how your audience is behaving. And also having a great SEO platform. A lot of people don't really understand and SEO is a bit of an unknown space in the digital world, but it's critically important to getting free traffic, and also Google providing you with more and more volume of audience versus penalising you for poor links, quality of links, and backlinks. So I implore every single person, every single business to spend the time on understanding that data before you go and launch into the campaign. One of the biggest questions people ask me is, how much should I spend in digital marketing? And my response to that back is, that's not the question to respond back. Once you know your data and your conversion rates and where your drop-off rates are, the number will fall at the bottom of those statistics. But if you don't know what that looks like, then you never know how much you need to spend. So it takes some time. Be prepared to fail, but our motto is fail fast. Data moves so quickly, industries change, consumer behaviour changes. We fail all the time, but we put to market really quickly, we test and measure it on a regular basis, we learn from it, and we move forward. We don't not make decisions, and that's the biggest advice I can give people in the digital landscape.
Ralph, that sounds like a great segue into the background to VRC at Home, because I know, knowing you would have used a lot of the data insights, but I'm sure there was some consumer analysis that you used to inform what you were about to create before you did it. Can you give us some insights in there? Was there a bit of trial and error? Was there a bit of guesswork? It would have been a bit of feel, given your experience in and around the VRC and others as well.
Yeah, so we had a couple of different factors here. Not only did we really want to make sure that our members and others could connect with us and all that we do, we really wanted to make sure that if we could, we provide value back to our sponsors and our partners. And so it was twofold around what are the things that if you're sitting at home and you're engaging with the race club, you would find interesting. So that was allowing you to actually obviously access racing, which you can do through racing.com, but also a digital race book that allows you to actually look at the races and participate in the actual process of a race book. It's actually quite an old-fashioned digital one where you actually turn the pages, but also putting some rich stories in there around the background of certain horses or the background of bits and pieces, and trying to make sure that aligning with our brand, this concept of modern, exciting race meets, but with this lovely sense to tradition and history. So a lot of content development, diving into our archives, assets that we have that we don't always have time to actually mine, and using that as a way to start to really create some stories and some narratives. The second piece was, if you are sitting at home, and it just feels like such a long time ago now, but at that moment it was, well, you want to be doing exercise and you want to have food. So how do we use some of our partners to give special offers to our membership through the VRC at Home platform that allows you to have a bit of Flemington, whether that be chicken sandwiches from Peter Rollins delivered to your house, or access to some of Lex's celebrities talking about how they're managing at home. So really developing content, whether it be links, special offers, some of the celebrities talking to camera about what they're doing, and accessing and providing value back to a lot of our partners in that way as well. And then finally thinking about the depth of racing and getting some of the racing participants, some of the Nick Williams of the world, the trainers, jockeys, who are actually really excited to start to be at home and talking to the different participants. So we have a lovely vignette on our VRC at Home in the racing section where we've got a 9-year-old boy whose passion is to win the Melbourne Cup, talking to jockeys and trainers about that and what it's like and how it feels, and really allowing everyone to engage at a different level, but at a level that we now think is actually only going to enhance. We can actually have people on course and really, really enjoying it. And that'll only grow, I think, as we get better. Now, what you do find fairly quickly, and Ben, you're touching a little bit on this, is we've got a little bit, I think it looks very nice and we're very happy with the way it looks. The back end is really clunky and really messy, and there's lots of band-aids going on. So for us, the longer term, we'll be saying, right, we sort of know what we want at the front. We need to now invest and think about how we can be much more agile behind and really have a comprehensive digital plan and start to invest in some of those things that make it easy for us to actually provide opportunities to access lots of different things in a way that allows us to sort of learn and continue to make it better and better.
Ralph, I love the fact that you've taken one of the VRC cornerstones, which is tradition, and rolled that into the new digital environment. I think that's brilliant. But you can't say Peter Rollins chicken sandwiches just before lunch and not expect to make me hungry. So I think everyone on the
VRC at Home, everybody, just pop in there and see what you can find.
So Carmel, we will get through this phase, no doubt about that. What does the future look like in terms of when the physical experience returns? Will you still keep the digital audience engaged in the same way that you have through this journey?
It's an interesting question because in many ways, having the focus that we've had on digital is like a dream come true for me. And we have to move into a space now where we're looking at a blended model, I think. The physical sites are always very important, and I've never seen digital as a replacement for that. In fact, it's the opposite. It's something that we are now seeing as something that's always open, always on. And we're kind of moving from a museum at home type of thinking to a museum that's always open type of thinking. And what do we do for that space? And I think we've also, there's been a bit of a recognition of the ability of digital to provide access to audiences that don't normally come to the museum or can't come to the museum. And we're considering the value of that very closely. So for instance, we would traditionally always have a museum lecture series held in one of our theatres at Melbourne Museum. On a good night, we might get 150 people turn up to that. We've done a couple via Zoom now, just as an experiment, and we've had households of 250 turn up to those. Wow. And it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe this is the way we should keep going with this. And I think that's the sort of things we're looking at. We're looking at this, what is best for the platform, what is best for the audience, how do we manage that moving forward? And there's lots and lots of opportunities, but we are seeing that this digital presence of ours is something that we need to keep amplifying, and obviously keep setting those goals, as Ben has said, around the acquisition, those acquisition goals that we've got for that platform. So we definitely want to keep it going. We are considering things like, how do we look all of our programs through the digital lens now? For instance, we've had a successful adult program called Nocturnal over the past year, which was like turning the museum into a nightclub once a month, and having music on site. Now, I had a great conversation yesterday with people around, well, what do we do with that concept? How do we make that a digital product? And so we're doing that thinking as well. So we are definitely going to continue with the digital. Obviously, the physical experience is still restricted, so we still have to be very mindful of that. Our website, though, has shifted from having Museum at Home take it over to now having to deliver on a lot of messages. And that is something we're going to have to sort of work through in terms of making the website really clear, because we've got to tell people what's on at the museum, how to buy a ticket there. There's a lot of messaging going on. So that is something that we're going to be definitely looking at in terms of website usability and discoverability in the next phase.
That's great. Before I come to audience questions, I might then come to you for something that I know business owners out there would be thinking about in terms of, okay, I know I now have to put a digital strategy in place if I haven't done that. How do I get a return on it? Because ultimately, as a business owner, that's the thing that's going to drive the decision. I'd love your insights before we jump across to the audience for questions.
Sure. Got to say, I love hearing other businesses starting to use data and digital more often, because that excites me for the future of my career. So, hopefully that benefits me in the long run. Listen, I mean, that's a very broad question of how you can start to monetize. I think when thinking about that question, the best bit of advice I can provide people when they start to look at their monetization, which we've talked about previously about having all the conversion pixels tracking through, but very much a crawl, walk, run approach with digital. What a lot of businesses I see go to market, and they don't consider that a lot of the marketing that is put out there is based on opinions, not data. And what I try to employ is put 5 or 6 different messages to market before you really launch your campaign. Use multiple A/B testing platforms to find out what does and doesn't work in different channels. And a great example of that is what converts in a Google search campaign might not convert it to a social media campaign. You can't just run the one bit of creative and hope to get the same result across every platform. We encourage people to be using multiple different landing page testing mechanisms to see what converts the best. It's about percentage changes. You're not going to get wholesale changes. You're looking at 0.5%, 1%, 1.5%. But compound that over a period of time, that's a very, very large difference in your profit line at the end of that campaign. So I encourage people to not be fearful of trying something different, not be fearful being locked into the brand that you are set for your business. Test colors of buttons, images, call to actions. All these things can make substantial differences to your business. And Paul, I know you're seeing that firsthand, that you know, a colour of a button from a blue to a red can be the difference between 2% conversion rate. So be really open to that. As I said previously, fail fast. And once you understand that, and you understand what your consumers look like, then really heavily invest in your platform moving forward.
Great. I'm loving watching the comments section at the moment. The amount of digital connecting that's gone on through this seminar is just amazing. So great, because that's what part of this webinar here is for, is collaboration. If you meet new contacts along the way, even better. I'm going to hand over to Anne right now, who's our head of media and comms, and some of the questions that have been coming through. I might get you to ask the panel.
Thank you. And there's been a lot of interest in both the at-home experiences from museums and VRC and your experiences. One of the questions has been, what's been the biggest regret that you've had, or what would you have done differently now that you've got that hindsight of what you implemented? So I'll throw to both of you.
Carmel, do you want to go first?
Well, I'm just thinking through that biggest regret. I actually think we've had to run so hard. I think one of the things, I know we've got to this point after 100 days that people are feeling pretty exhausted and tired. So, but I think we're just in that environment of not knowing what the next step is going to be. I think we've managed to be quite agile, and we've stuck to a very strong principle of being present and empathetic. And just as Ben said, we've done a lot of experimentation. We haven't been afraid to put up what I call the minimum viable product and just see how that works and then build on that. So I think for me at the moment, it's the challenge, it's not a regret, but the challenge is actually taking it the next step into kind of blending our offer, and also making sure that our staff, who've been so fantastic at supporting digital and are now going back to thinking about their physical programs, how do we make that work so that we offer on those platforms as much as we've had in the last 100 days. So I think that's the biggest challenge we're looking at it right now.
I think I have similar thoughts, Carmel. I think for us, the biggest regret I have is that it took us a global pandemic to do this, because it actually proves that when you're focused on what you want to do, you're clear about what you want to do, and you just have people ready to do it, it can actually be done much, much faster. And that we put in a lot of roadblocks in the way to see reasons why something can't happen as fast, or doesn't sound quite right, or it might be a bit difficult. And all those things are true at some level, but you can blast through them. And Ben, you said fail fast. I prefer not to fail at all, but you got to give a crack, right? And when you do give things a crack, things aren't always going to go perfectly. One of the things I think we did do well is we prepared everyone that this is going to be 80-20. We're not going to get this perfectly right. Please be aware it's not going to be perfectly right, but we're going to get it done fast. And that lasted a little while. After a while, people forget that you said that, and now suddenly they're looking for perfection. And you're like, remember we said that thing about it's not going to be perfect. But I think I think we're going to learn a lot from this this whole process around what you can get done and how you can go about doing things when the scenario around you changes.
Right. Now we've probably got time for one more.
Yeah, I've got one that I think is really mostly aimed at Ben, and they're merging a couple of questions here. More about just the shift in marketing in general. Is this now signaling a shift from traditional marketing to digital marketing in terms of marketing spend? Are you spending a higher percentage on digital media than traditional media now? What's that sort of percentage split, and how has it changed in the current environment?
Good question on the percentage split. I'm not sure I've got that readily available, but I think that shift to digital had begun pre-COVID anyway, and obviously, you know, the growth of our business and those digital businesses in Australia was off the growth of digital. I actually truly believe this is going to shift majority of marketing spend to 95% online. I mean, even if you just look at some of the traditional mediums right now as papers and prints, I think the majority of them haven't been running. Local newspapers, I think if you start to look at the size of some of those papers at the moment, are starting to diminish. The teams within those traditional mediums are starting to diminish as well. So I think we'll find that majority of businesses and even bricks and mortar stores are really starting to focus on digital. I think some of the numbers coming through the retail chains that they're doing greater sales than they did pre-COVID with diminished labour costs and overheads. So, you know, I think as you read those stories, if you're not thinking about digital and you are not focused on it now, then you are going to be a long way behind, and you'll be very, very difficult to catch up. I can assure you that the market is saturated with digital marketing now. 10 years ago, you could buy space. Now you have to fight and scrap for every dollar. So if you haven't considered it, you need to be. It's the way of the future. And I love hearing that Carmel and Ralph are already looking at that is the staple of their business moving forward, although Carmel's got some bricks and mortars and so does Ralph. But absolutely, you need to be in this space. And I think the reality for most businesses is you're going to need to have experts within your fields within that. It is so diverse. I personally can't keep up with the amount of platforms that are available. So make sure you surround yourself with people that do. Don't try and be an expert. Get the experts in to help you get the best return for your investment.
Brilliant. Great insight. And thanks, Anne. As I said, we'll pass all the questions back to the panelists, and I'm sure we'll get responses. Then we'll post those on the website as well. I want to finish off with one question to all three of you. We're so lucky to have such visionary market leaders on the webinar with us today on the panel. For those that are thinking about moving into a digital presence, you've done it. What would be the one piece of advice that you would give to people listening that might inspire them to take that step? And Ralph, I might start with you.
Look, Ben just touched on it. I think the understanding where to go and where to invest, you can't be slapdash. You have to be thoughtful about it. So really understanding your data, understanding who you want to talk to, and the best ways of going about that, the best platforms, and also the best messaging. It's a multi-layered concept. It's who you talk to, how you talk to them, what it looks like when you talk to them, and all of those things can make a huge difference. And so it isn't something that is easily done well quickly, unless you've got the right people on board.
Great. Carmel?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think when I started at the museum, I took a bit of a now, where, how approach, and it's similar to what Ben and Ralph said today too. You've really got to sit down and look at what you're currently doing and where you want to be, and then you can start to plot how do you get there. So having that goal in place of the where is really, really important, and identifying that, so you know what are the benchmarks you need to measure, what are the goals you need to set, and in line with that is to also analyze what is your unique property in terms of what do you want that message to be, and listen to your audience, listen to the people who engage with your visitors and your members, and listen to the industry, and listen to the world in terms of what it's doing around online. We do a lot of research around audience behaviors, and look at us now. You know, we're all video chat is the thing that everybody has learned how to do over the last 3 months. So we need to take advantage of that. So that's more than one thing, but that's what I'd recommend.
Wonderful. And Ben, round us out.
I agree with both of those, and probably would be my first response. But I think to round out the final piece about digital marketing is don't be singular in your approach. Just because a consumer doesn't want to buy now doesn't mean they don't buy in the future. Look at how you're driving traffic to your site, and are you capturing that information? And a great example of that is if you're looking to build your database of potential leads, and you're driving a competition that's giving away a free gift card. Don't just ask for the name, email, and phone number. Provide a secondary option and say, if you follow us on social media, you'll get a second entry. If you refer a friend, you'll get a third entry. Make that single dollar work harder for you. Don't just consider it as a single option. You need to consider how you make that dollar work 3 or 4 times harder for you moving forward. That'd be my second approach after Ralph's initial response.
That's brilliant. I mean, I think the bottom line is there's no silver bullet here, but there are plenty of people out there that can help. And you've heard from some of that today with our experts. So to you, Carmel, to you, Ben, and to you, Ralph, thanks so much for your time and your insights today. It's been brilliant. It really does show the power of the digital world and just how your imagination has enabled consumer engagement at such a difficult time. We've not seen a time like this before, but the responses have been unbelievably great. It's not only been inspirational today, but there's some real practical lessons that everybody can take away. And I know these insights will be helpful for our members and guests that have joined the webinar today. So with that, don't forget to head to Becky's website at www.victorianchamber.com.au for all your business advice. And of course, you can download today's webinar from that, probably first up tomorrow. And you'll be able to get the Q&A back from today's session as well. And also head to www.business.vic.gov.au for access to all of the state government support and grant applications that are available through this time as well. So again, thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day. But importantly, right now, remember to stay safe. This COVID fight is not over yet. Thanks.